So there's this really stupid concept that just won't fucking die, that a woman's brain and a man's brain are very different things. This has led to a lot of sexism, a lot of discrimination, and a lot of expectations that that oftentimes people find too much pressure to fulfill, especially when they can't fulfill them, as well as a lot of transphobia, because it's kind of, there's an article that was just posted about how there's sort of popular study that kept on getting shared around that when looking at trans people's brains, they found that trans men's brains are very similar to cis men's brains and vice versa. And when you actually start looking into these studies, you find some problems with them, but I'll get into that. But basically but right into the root of the problem is the whole idea that a woman's brain and a man's brain are very different. Not to just as a side note, this completely excludes a lot of gender identities and types of trans people, such as non-binary and gender fluid, but anyways, moving on. This is problematic because it causes men to feel insecure or like they have to meet a certain expectation to be hypermasculine, and when they aren't, when they don't want to be hypermasculine and aggressive all the time, they're treated poorly because of it, or they might have low self-esteem because of it. It also leads to women not being taken as seriously because they think that because you think women can't handle the same things that men can, and it just leads to a lot of forcing people to feel like they have to act a certain way or else there's something wrong with them. When really, human beings are so diverse that you can't literally say that you know so much about someone just because of something as stupid as the junk that they had when they were born. So while there are differences depending on hormone level, it's in the hypothalamus is just a slight difference, but in terms of actual thinking ability, and keep in mind, hypothalamus, that's the main part that they can tell the difference between a man's brain and a woman's brain. And also, this is all excluding intersex anyways, but I'll get into that in a sec. But is the part that controls things like hunger, sleep, temperature, or like sex drive and stuff, which is why it's affected. And hormonal levels, yes, because anyway, so that's why it's affected, and it's slightly different, but that's the hypothalamus, and that's the more basic physical needs and urges, not the cognitive frontal lobe, which is pretty much the same person to person. I mean, I've seen more differences in terms of personality and way of doing things between an artist and a physicist. Sorry, artists and engineers, they have more overlap. So, anyways, than I have between a man and a woman of even slightly different fields or whatever. Because the thing is that when you are using this sort of the gender or whatever, you're limiting people to what they're capable of. And you're limiting human progression. And I've said this before, and I've made a whole fucking video about it. But, like, no, stop. Moving on to the trans issue, which is the main thing, and I don't want to drag out this video like I normally do. It also makes people feel insecure that maybe they're not trans enough to have, if they had a brain scan, it wouldn't show up as the right type of thing. And also, people who are gender fluid, for those who do not know, and you haven't seen my other videos on the topic, gender fluid means that the gender you identify with kind of changes and it's not consistent. Some days, sometimes, for even long periods of time, you'll feel like a man or like a woman or neither. Because that's another thing, is that there are people who do not identify with either being a man or a woman. They're called non-binary people, and there's two other terms for there's genderqueer, which is completely androgynous and sort of whatever, and then agender, which means they don't really feel like they even have a gender. So there are people of these identifications, and what the hell are you going to say that their brains look like? And also, like, there could be people who are trans, and like you could have a trans man or a trans woman who, like, you have a trans man that still likes kind of feminine stuff, or a trans woman who still likes kind of masculine stuff. And the thing is that doesn't make them any less of a man or a woman, because you have cis men who like feminine stuff, and you have cis women who like masculine stuff, but nobody questions their gender. So there's the whole idea that you have to be trans enough to be taken seriously, and even then, fuck, you can't. Trans people are oftentimes not taken seriously. Which is a huge problem in terms of medical care for trans people, because if they aren't the extreme portrayal of masculinity or femininity, depending, forget if you're fucking anything else, then oftentimes they won't be given hormones or prescriptions or like whatever with doctors, because there's a lot of issues with gatekeeping, which is kind of keeping people from treatments that they need because they don't meet the requirements of cisgendered doctors who may or may not be fucking assholes. And you can just go on Twitter and check out the hashtag #transhealthfail to see a lot of examples of that. And I mean, not all trans people want to fully transition either. Like, they could feel like a trans man but not feel the need to have the bottom surgery. They could feel perfectly happy with a mastectomy. And also you could have people who are, like genderqueer, non-binary, agender, gender fluid, etc., who may want some, transitional surgery, but obviously not all of it, or even they might want all of it and whatever, but they don't identify as male or whatever, or female or whatever, despite their assigned gender. Like, for example, or even you could have people who aren't trans who just really don't like parts of their body. Like, I can't stand my boobs. They're fucking huge and I want them smaller or gone, to be entirely honest. But the thing is that, it doesn't fit with the totally normal societally imposed idea of femininity or whatever the fucking bullshit that is. But, train of thought. Right. So, this kind of frigs up that, and also there's issue with the DSM, which is the diagnostical something manual, fuck. It's basically the big old book of mental disorders and illnesses. So it still lists transness as a, mental illness, usually under gender identity disorder or at the very least gender dysphoria. And I kind of have mixed feelings about this because, one, it leads to a lot of people thinking, oh, that means there's something wrong with them, even though there's not. But from what I've heard, the only reason why it stayed there is so that it can be, person's transition can be treated as a medical issue, not as cosmetic, so that, you could get healthcare plans to potentially cover them, or at the very least you could see your doctor about it instead of seeing a plastic surgeon about it. So that's kind of why I have mixed feelings about that, but oftentimes it is misused, and a lot of people don't understand that that's why it's stayed in there and not been able to change. At the very least, they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria in the most recent one. But anyways, that's getting sidetracked. But yeah, anyway, so back to the original study and whatever, showing the differences and whatever. First of all, they used a very small sample size, 6 brains. That is so small it shouldn't even be considered a real fucking study. And it was only of trans women. And they had already, and I think all of them, they had already been taking estrogen. So, they'd already been doing hormone therapy. So, you can't really use these studies. But, yeah, anyways, it's stupid. And I've even seen people to try to prove that being gay isn't a choice, to say that gay men have brains more similar to women's and vice versa, which is stupid, because because then it reinforces the stereotype that gay men have to be feminine and gay women have to be masculine, and completely ignores things like bisexuality, pansexuality, asexuality, or any other sexuality besides homosexual and heterosexual. And they already have enough issues with being erased from representation, consideration, etc. So, yeah, fun times. Bullshit with, so... Let's not let something as stupid as the junk in our pants dictate, or who we're attracted to, or whatever, dictate what we can do or how we think, because we are a diverse race of being, and we're all individually capable of amazing things, and we shouldn't let anything hinder that. Anyways, thanks for watching.